So we'll go to Lita.
Thanks, Sabrina. Two things. One, can you tell us whether or not the 2 Iron Domes have yet been delivered to Israel? And secondly, on this sort of ongoing spate of attacks against U.S. forces in both Syria and Iraq, you all have said repeatedly that this is, Iran continues to support these groups, et cetera. But I'm wondering if more specifically you can say whether or not in recent weeks has the department seen evidence of any either control, direction, or specific aid to these groups more recently as opposed to a broader, they do it all the time?
So in terms of your second question first, on recent activities, I'm not going to speak to our intelligence and go beyond what we've said publicly. We know that Iran equips, supports, funds these IRGC-backed groups in Iraq and Syria. And so while I won't speak to anything specific in recent weeks, we don't suspect that relationship has terminated in any way. In terms of you asked about the Iron Dome systems. So we're in the process of providing those systems to Israel. We'll let them speak to when they're actually delivered, but that's an ongoing process.
So the process is ongoing right now and has not been finalized.
That's right. Idris.
Do you believe deterrence against these Iran-backed militias attacking you in Iraq and Syria is working?
I'm sorry, what was the first part of the question?
Is the deterrence against them working?
Well, what you're seeing is we are very candid about we're seeing an uptick in attacks, but so far we have not seen any significant casualties. We've not seen significant damage to our infrastructure. Our posture in the region has certainly been bolstered by the assets that you've seen us move into the CENTCOM AOR with the Ike transiting there now, with the Ford in the Eastern Med. I would say that while we are seeing an uptick in attacks, our purpose is to ensure that this conflict doesn't widen out beyond Israel. So I would say that deterrence right now it's incredibly strong on our side. We are sending an incredible message to any state or non-state actor that would want to seek to get involved in the conflict, that they do not do that. And so, again, while we see these attacks increase, we're not seeing significant casualties or significant harm to our service members.
There have been more attacks, I think, against U.S. forces since your retaliatory strikes than prior to it. So I'm just wondering what why do you, I guess the injuries could be low because A, because of luck, or B, because of the measures you took, right? So do you believe the intent of these groups has changed in any way, or is it just that the precautions that you've taken have worked?
Well, I can't speak to the group's intent. All I can speak to is what we are doing to protect our service members, and you're seeing that the Secretary made the decision to put more air defenses in the region to help support and protect our service members both in Iraq and Syria. In terms of intent, I can't speak to that, but we did see these type of attacks in early March of this year. Again, we responded then. We responded on October 26th. We're going to make the decisions on when we respond, and if we respond next, we'll leave that to a time and place of our choosing, but I just don't have more for you on that. Yeah.
Thanks, Sabrina. I want to follow up on that. You and other Pentagon officials have said the U.S. will do anything it takes to protect those troops, especially in Syria and Iraq. But as Idris pointed out, since the 26th and those limited counterstrikes by the U.S., we've seen no slowdown and maybe an acceleration, if anything. So it seems clear that those groups have not been deterred. So is what you're saying that taking more forceful action against those groups to try to end the threat against U.S. forces might end up causing more blowback than it's worth? Or is that the reason why there's so much hesitance to strike more forcefully?
I wouldn't say there's hesitancy. We decide to respond at a time and place of our choosing. We don't necessarily have to be tit for tat every single time. We are incredibly strategic about when we decide to take kinetic action. And you saw that on October 26th when we did hit key infrastructure nodes that these IRGC-backed groups use. So it's really not necessarily of comparison every time there's an attack. It's how successful we can be about damaging and destroying infrastructure that they have used to. And that's exactly what we did on October 26th. Again, with the increase of attacks, these have not been successful. They have not resulted in serious injuries, and we're incredibly grateful that we have these air defenses in place and that we have been able to protect our troops. That is something that is of the utmost importance to the Secretary and this administration. And while I say that, you're also seeing that this conflict has not widened out beyond Israel, that our deterrence posture is significantly increased in the region, and we're going to continue to both publicly and privately convey that that any actor who wants to seek advantage of this conflict, that they do not do that. Yeah, I'll go to Will.
So last week, the Islamic Resistance in Iraq umbrella group for these militant organizations threatened to broaden its campaign of attacks on U.S. forces starting this week. And there's definitely been an uptick in claims since Sunday. Have you seen an uptick in attacks that have come close to U.S. bases in the past week? Has this been kind of borne out operationally, that they followed through on this or not?
Well, we've certainly seen attacks continue within the last, few days. Are you asking specifically how close they have gotten to the base?
In terms of the volume of attacks since Sunday, has there been an increase compared to what, even within the past 3 weeks, what we've been seeing?
I wouldn't say that there's been a significant increase. It's sort of steady state, and I can just give you a quick update of where we stand today, because I think there are some reports that there was a rocket attack at MSS Euphrates just a few hours ago. So there was no injury to our service members or any damage to any infrastructure. But between October 17th and November 7th, or today, U.S. forces have been attacked at least 40 times to date, with 22 separate times in Iraq and 18 separate times in Syria. And that's a mix of one-way attack drones and rockets. And just to clarify one thing before you guys start doing the math, we did have some discrepancy in reporting of an attack on October 25th. That was incorrectly reported. That was an attack in Omar Field in Syria. So we're not counting that as an attack. So just want to clarify. So the numbers, again, just for complete, absolute transparency and want to make sure that you get them right, is as of today, 40 attacks on U.S. forces, 22 separate times in Iraq, and 18 separate times in Syria. Liz, yeah.
What qualifies as an attack versus an attempted attack? How do you define that?
I think General Ryder spoke probably a little bit better about this the other day, but it's more of an art than a science. It's the threat to U.S. forces and how close a drone or a rocket gets to the base. So we assess each one each time on what constitutes an attack. There are different ways on how different agencies also characterize the attack. So we're trying to do the best we can and provide you the most transparent information that we can as quickly as possible. But it's more of the threat in the vicinity of that would characterize the attack.